Hello there, young ones. Let me welcome you to this teaching module. Well, for many of you, the subject of economics is fairly new, and you probably are wondering, what is economics all about? Well, stay with me because I'm going to take you on this ride of discovering this very beautiful subject, a subject meant for intelligent, alert, and young minds like yours. Are you ready? Let me take you on then. Well, economics, it's not a rocket science, is it? It is a social science that studies you and the world, your behavior, and how the world behaves. Let me show you how. Right now, you have a mobile in your hands, right? Well, you bought it. Someone sold it to you. Before that, it was manufactured by someone. You know, economics studies this behavior of yours as well as theirs. Here in this case, economics studies you, the seller, and the manufacturer. So, in this example, economics studies you, why you bought the mobile. Did you have the purchasing power? And your demand for the mobile. Economics studies the seller. Why is he selling mobile phones and not, say, video games? How does he know how much to sell? How did he set up his store or his enterprise? Economics studies the manufacturer. Why did he produce? How did he produce it? And how did he get the means or the finance to produce it? In our example, you went and bought what you needed with your budget in hand, isn't it? So that makes you a consumer. Well, economics studies consumer behavior, and economics studies an economic activity that you are involved in called consumption. The one who sells stuff to you is a seller or a distributor, a retailer, perhaps a wholesaler, or even an agent. Well, he helps in the exchange and distribution of goods. And so economics studies the distribution of goods and services. Here are listed some of the functions of these various entities which are directly related to the economic activity of distribution. Well, distributors are involved in sales and marketing. They build relationships with manufacturers. They study the market actively. Wholesalers fulfill retail orders. They resell goods in bulk. They focus on storage and delivery goods. And they buy from distributors or manufacturers. Retailers, on the other hand, have outlets to purchase products. They sell in stores or online even nowadays. They buy from distributors or wholesalers. Whereas agents may handle special shipments and contracts. They work on marketing and they specialize in customer relationship management. The one who produces or manufactures goods, products, or output is the producer or manufacturer. You can see some production activity happening here. So economics studies production and thereby also studies producer behavior. In summation, we see economics studies production, consumption, and distribution. So you see, economics, pronounced economics or economics, is the social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. This is a rather simple definition of economics. We will be learning about more definitions in economics as we go by. Now we need to define this economic activity called production. What is production? It is the transformation of inputs into outputs. It is a transformation of raw materials into finished products. So you see here in the picture, we have some labor on the production line or the assembly line. You see various inputs being injected into the process of production. There is some technical know-how, some immaterial inputs being used in the process of production, and what we get finally is the output or the product. So that means that production is a process that combines various material inputs and immaterial inputs like know-how in order to make something for consumption or output. It is the act of creating an output, a good, a service, or a product which has value and contributes to the utility of individuals. Now let's move on to define the next economic activity that you saw in the definition of economics, which is distribution. Here we see key words or a mind map that brings to mind all other related terms pertaining to distribution. For example, sales, brand, strategy, marketing, sell, retail, brand service, management, value, pricing. All these words are related to the word distribution, somehow or the other. Well, what is distribution now? Distribution is the process of making a product or service available for whom? For the consumer or business user who needs it. This can be done directly by the producer or the service provider, or using indirect channels with distributors or intermediaries. Now, intermediaries could mean middlemen who are kind of facilitating the process of exchange and distribution of goods. Now, here is where you and I come in the picture. We all like shopping, don't we? And in the process of shopping, we end up procuring goods, buying goods, and consuming them. Well, this brings us to the next economic activity, which is consumption. What is consumption? It is the use of goods and services for the satisfaction of human wants. So when we buy something and we consume it, what we are basically doing is we are using the good and service in order to satisfy our wants. Consumption is the start of all human economic activity. In fact, it is centered around us. For the very purpose of consumption, you have the other related activity, which is production. So therefore, we say consumption is the sole purpose of all production. Therefore, we see in studying these economic activities, economics helps us to understand the world around us better and to find solutions to all our economic problems. And this brings us to something else that economics studies. Economics studies about goods and services. That is the end product of all economic or business activity. We need to define what goods are. A good is anything tangible. Tangible is something that can be seen, felt, experienced, that can satisfy a human want or a need. For example, books, cars, petrol, food items, groceries, toiletries, machineries, seeds, fertilizers, and so on. And so that brings us to define what are services. Services are activities carried out for the satisfaction of human needs or wants. Example, a doctor's service, an engineer's service, a teacher's service, service of agricultural laborers, and so on. Here are some examples contributed by my students of 11th grade Commerce and Arts batch 2021. And I love the examples they have given me. Examples of goods given by them are jewelry, clothes, mobiles, books, furniture, grocery items, bags, accessories, stationery, computer hardware, fruits and veggies, and this is an area where we refer to as perishable goods. Then they gave me examples that we see around us today in the age of coronavirus, which is face masks and sanitizers. Machinery, coal, metals, precious gems, favorite of the boys, automobiles, that is cars, bikes, trucks, and so on. Medical equipment, fertilizers, petrol, diesel, that is fuel, various food products, chemicals, sports equipment, utensils, machines, and so on. I'm so proud to give their examples in my video that shows that they have learned the concept really well. And now moving on to the examples of services given by my students. Here they are. Banking and insurance. Transport services covering road, air, water and rail. Communication networks. Cable TV services. Hospitality services. Teaching, health and education services. Trade, shipping and logistics. Automobile repair. Tailoring. Advertising services. Restaurant services. Postal services. Other financial services, probably dealing with the stock market, the foreign exchange market, mutual funds and so on. Meal delivery, medical checkup services, services of electricity and water supply, PWD sewage works. Social work was a nice example given by a student. Mass communication services, LPG guest provider services, caretakers, selling fish, bread, milk, newspapers door to door, and with special reference to the Goan Poder or the bread man who has been serving for ages door to door. Then you have online orders, garbage collection services, essential services of police and defense, internet services, and so on. Bravo students, that's well done. Here are some thoughts on wants and needs from real life by my students. Now, where wants were concerned, some expressed that wants could be desires or wishes, things that make our life more enjoyable. For example, ice creams. We may want branded stuff. We may want luxuries, better models of goods. Any and all goods available could be wanted. Wants are unlimited. Once one want is satisfied or met, another may crop up. When needs are concerned, my students express these to be needs: water, fuel, electricity, internet. In today's world, ventilators, oximeters, PPE kits in the hospitals, thermal guns, ATMs, education, health, jobs, medicines, entertainment and leisure, defense, development. Someone talked about immunity being the need of the hour. Money, of course, is a need. Soaps, detergents, groceries. I love this example of a need, clean environment. And of course, summing up the basic necessities of life, that is food, shelter, and clothing. Well, students, differentiating between needs and wants helps us to make responsible economic choices, something that economics teaches us about. We know that in an economic setup, there are various sectors or stakeholders. On one hand, you have the households, you have firms, you have the government and the trade sector and so on. Well, essentially, there is some relationship between sectors. For example, households have a need for goods and services, and that need is satisfied by firms. So firms supply goods to the households. Well, who helped to produce these goods? It was none other than the households. The households provide their services to the firms, with the help of which the firms were able to produce goods. In turn, the households pay for the goods and services to the firms some consumption expenditure. And the firms pay the households for their services in terms of incomes. So you see, one sector is related to another. So economics helps us to understand how the system works, how every economic decision or activity affects you and me. Now I'd like you to consider, what if you were living on an island all alone by yourself, marooned on it? How would life be? You would want to experience friendships, relationships with others. That would make you happy, isn't it? You would also want to buy goods from other countries, from other places. And you can't live by yourself. You need to share your resources with others. So it is with countries. They don't live in isolation. There are connections between countries, across countries. Countries depend on each other for resources and goods and services. Yeah? So economics studies these trade relations, imports and exports. Not only that, we are connected in another area. There is a movement of manpower from one country to the other in search of jobs. So we are a part of the global economy, even though we have our own economies in our own respective countries. And economics helps us to study how the economies function. It helps us to study about international trade and how it affects countries and their people. So we have come to realize that economics is an important part of our lives. Economics affects our daily lives in both obvious and subtle ways. From an individual perspective, economics frames many choices we have to make about work, leisure, that is our free time, consumption, and even how much to save. Our lives are also influenced by macroeconomic trends such as inflation, which is a situation of rise in prices, interest rates, and economic growth. So when we hear that the prices are rising, doesn't it affect our purchasing power? Yes, it does. If we hear that interest rates on savings accounts of banks increases, we would want to save more. So it influences our lives in many ways. Now here is another important concept that comes under the purview of economics, which is opportunity costs. Now we face opportunity or economic costs in deciding what to buy, or perhaps even when making a relevant economic choice. Basically, it studies the choices we make. For example, to buy or not to buy. And if we decide to buy, then what we are to buy. What good are we to choose over another good? Let me give you an example to help you to understand the concept of opportunity cost. Now consider that we have this man. He is out looking out for a residential house to purchase one. And he sees a house that costs rupees 65 lakhs. And then there is another house that costs rupees 60 lakhs. Well, the one that costs 65 lakhs is close to where his parents stay. So he feels that he should choose this one over the house that costs rupees 60 lakhs. So he makes an economic choice. He decides to buy the house costing 65 lakhs. What did he forego? He forewent this other house that costs 60 lakhs. So the opportunity cost of buying the house costing 65 lakhs is the house costing 60 lakhs. Well then, economics studies macroeconomic concepts like inflation, economic growth, employment, prospects that affect our living standards. So basically these are variables or concepts that are related to the economy as a whole. Well, all those macroeconomic concepts do affect our living standards as we discussed earlier. So it studies concepts like demand pull, cost push, built-in prices that push the wages up, and so on. You must have realized that in the study of economics, there is another study or another subject that we're going to deal with, and that is statistics. Well, why is statistics so important for an economist? Economics studies facts and data to help solve economic problems and issues. So we need to know the facts. We need to be sure. And our data tells us that there is a problem existing. For example, if you are told that the GDP rate is negative now, that tells us that the number of goods being produced in our economy is falling. It tells us also the other implications that perhaps if less is going to be produced, then less people are going to be employed, income levels are going to fall, and so on and so forth. So economics has a very important tool called statistics, which helps us in analyzing data, comparing data, even predicting future economic outcomes. So you have seen that this subject covers all areas or fields, subjects like business, banking, money, income, expenditure, public finance, international trade, sectors like health, education, finance, public services. It even studies the society, the country, or even the world at large, the past, present, and tries to predict future outcomes. Well, there's so much more. And let's discover as we go along. Walk with me and I'll take you on this wisdom-filled ride this year. You know what the best part about my subject is? Well, it's not mine anymore, it's yours as well. The best part is that it makes you a thinker and smarter. You become important in this subject. You know, even engineers have to study it. So feel smart, okay, when you study this subject. By the way, did you know economics is called as the queen of social sciences? And why not? Well, as you have seen earlier, economics is related to and covers even other subjects across social sciences. And so it's rightly called as the queen of social sciences. And lastly, here's moving on to some very relevant definitions of economics. The first being the wealth definition given by an economist, Adam Smith, who is also called as the father of modern economics. You know, he wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations. And in his book, he defines economics as an inquiry into the factors that determine the wealth of a country and its growth. In other words, he says that economics is a science of wealth and wealth creation. The next definition in economics is one given by Alfred Marshall. As an economist, he defines economics in his book Principles of Economics as the study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. He says that it examines that part of individual or social action which is most intimately connected with attainment and use of material requisites of well-being. Well, I'd like you to remember this part of his definition, that economics is the study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. And last but not the least, the scarcity definition given by a renowned economist, Lionel Robbins. He wrote a book, an essay on the nature and significance of economic science. And in this book, he defines economics as a science that studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. Now students, I want you to remember that when you think of the word ends, I want you to remember the word wants. So we are trying to study the relationship between wants and scarce means or resources. But these resources have alternative or other uses, whereas ends or wants are unlimited, means or resources are scarce in relation to their demand. So they have to be put to other uses, and the best use has to be selected. This is what Lionel Robbins says that economics is all about. Having come to the end of my teaching module, as in all my videos, I like to leave you students behind with a thought, something to ponder upon, some value, or even a wee bit of advice. Well, here it goes. I urge you, my dear students, to love to learn. Love to learn anything and everything that you could get your hands on. It could be sciences, it could be any other subject out there that interests you, technology, and so on. And at the end, don't study hard, okay? But study smart. Well, don't take me literally. If I tell you don't study hard, you may not study at all. I'm telling you, instead of studying hard, study smart. So, enjoy learning and stay blessed. Thank you for giving me a listening ear.